Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
And we look different today because we're somewhere else. We're not from the West Barn. We're from all the way back from 1979. This is Welcome to 1979, a great recording studio in Nashville. That is sort of, the idea here, I guess, is that it's a picture frame caught from 1979. Is there any gear in here that's newer than 1979?
Oh, yeah.
Other than Pro Tools?
Yeah, Pro Tools, my motto is if it sounds good, they would have had it in 1979. So we've got some newer microphones from Rupert Neve Designs and that kind of thing, And
this is Chris Mara.
Hello.
And Chris, you're the owner of 1979?
Yes, co-owner. My wife and I own it, yep.
Which is a big, how many square foot?
I think the studio itself is almost 7,000 square feet. And then Mara Machines, which is here too, is another 3 or 4. And we have an electroplating facility for vinyl records, which is another 3. So I think we're in the 13,000 square feet zone, I think.
It's a great building.
Thank you.
I had looked at this building to buy it before you bought it, and I just didn't have the muscle to do it. I was like, I can't. It was too big for me to take on. But it's a really, really great space. And we'll show some B-roll, but there's a bunch of couches that are period correct.
Yeah.
When you look at the racks, it's genuinely, we're staying true to most of this stuff.
Yeah.
You got an MCI console here, which people from the podcast will remember from what was
Tony
Platt's episode. This is the same model. This is the same make and model. Maybe not model, right?
I think same model. Yep.
Same make and model that they recorded Back in Black on. So this was the console that record was recorded on. Not this exact console, but this exact model and brand. So it's just such a cool thing. And on the walls over here, you have a bunch of 2-inch tape. You guys are committed to not going modern.
Right. Well,
I mean, tell us the mission statement behind.
Because I'm a recording engineer, and when I was younger, I got thrown into a bunch of really cool projects, and I really gleaned off the people that I was working for, and they would change how they worked based on the artist and what the artist wanted to do, and it started with that. And I kept that's kind of I took that on as myself as a goal for my engineering career, and it spilled over into the studio. This place and staff and equipment can record right to Pro Tools, not touch anything analog. And the very next minute, we can be recording without a computer screen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's how we operate here.
And why 1979?
Well, one, I think just it sounds cool. And my console's in 1978, my tape machine's in 1981. That's pretty much the only gear I had when I started it. And I'm like, well, why don't I just kind of
somewhere in the middle.
Split the difference, and it's the average of the gear we had at the time, and it just kind of has an ethos. The downside is we did brand a little hard on that. A lot of people next time I have a project for tape, I'm coming over. It's like, dude, we can do anything here. We've got.
Well, we're recording today's episode through 421s to Pro Tools. Yeah. I was thinking we would do it to wire recorder when I got here, but the wire recording machine was being used in another room on another session. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about your tape machines too.
Uh-huh.
So they're old MCI machines.
Yeah.
Which is what I think he said the AC/DC record was also.
That's absolutely what it was.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us, what is you're rebranding them as Mara machines. What's the difference between if I go out and get an MCI machine and get a Mara machine?
The biggest difference is if you call and say, hey, I bought an MCI machine on eBay and have a problem, I'll say, I'm sorry, we only talk to Mara machine owners. That's the biggest difference.
How much do you sell a plaque for?
Yeah, right. And secondly, the ones that we sell, when these were sold new in 1980, whatever, they came with a 1-year warranty. We restore them, and they come with a 6-month warranty and lifetime support. So if you buy one and sell it to somebody, they call and say, hey, I'm having some problems with my Mara machine. I'm like, hey, what's up? And then we jump on Zoom and fix it.
That's cool.
That's the main difference. And it's restored, and it works in some aspects better than new, and in some aspects as good as new. Because when they were made, they were mass-produced, so they weren't hand-soldered. So we're taking them apart and hand-soldering a lot of things that were machine-soldered at that time.
So if you bring a machine in, what are you doing to it to turn it into a Mara machine?
We tear it completely apart. It scatters, and then we recap it, we rebuild the power supply, rebuild the fan, put new wheels on it, paint the deck. We make now when you hit record, the VU meters go red. Relap the heads, put new heads on sometimes.
But in essence,
Yeah.
the mechanical parts, the transport,
Yeah.
these are the same. You're just sort of going through and doing a bolt off. What do they call that? A frame off restoration of it.
Yeah, and then we paint the deck like a Miller High Life gold, and then it's a Mara machine.
And I see you've got 24-track machines here. You got a couple 2-tracks. Are those 2-tracks back there?
Yep.
And is this a 4-track over
That's
here?
a half-inch 4-track, yeah.
Half-inch 4-track.
Those are very popular. That's going to a woman named Isla in Portland, Oregon. She's going to record her music on it as a
That's so
4-track.
cool.
Never owned a tape machine before. That's a big part of our clientele. They never used one or owned one. So the support that we've
Isn't
had.
that interesting? Because
it's
they're
awesome.
getting into it under the guise of they have a perception of what tape is.
Yep.
Do you
Well-
ever find that people are disillusioned once they
No.
realize that tape, I always tell people, like, all your favorite records were recorded on tape machines.
Yep.
So were all your shitty records that you
Yes.
hated, all the Sean Cassidy records or Captain and Tennille records.
Yeah,
Maybe-
it's really interesting, and I love it. And it's probably my favorite thing about the Mara Machines business is the exploration from artists and engineers. And the number one question is, like, what does tape sound like? And to your point, I say, buy anything recorded before 1982. Let's just pick a number.
Right.
And that was on tape. And they go, really? Yes. Why? Because there was no other way to do it. And they go, oh, well, I like a lot of Led Zeppelin. Then you've heard tape. I'm not saying you buy a Mara machine and you're going to sound like Led Zeppelin, right? But you've heard it.
These people have to learn how to bias these machines. And
Actually, so and this is a good hinge point on the technology of Welcome to 1979, right? So when I first started shipping machines to people who had never owned one before, we had a lot of issues. Like the machine's not working right, and then we would jump on Zoom or at the time like Skype or phone, and they didn't have the tape threaded right and they were using it wrong. So I read the manual that they got, and it says load tape, apply signal. Because if you were an engineer in 1980, you had used a tape machine before, you didn't need to, right? So we shot a video, like a user guide video, and the machine arrives calibrated. We have an app on the iOS store you can download, and it shows you how to do it step by step with photos, the whole deal.
oh, wow.
So,
And
yeah.
what does that cost? Like, do I bring a machine to you, or do you find a machine and then I buy it from you?
I source them. You call, order machine. We pull one out of the warehouse and restore it.
Let's say I want to buy a 24-track machine. What's a Mara totally rehab machine go for?
Right now, $12,000.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yep.
Where are you sourcing all these machines from?
They typically find me. People, it's a really nice way to do it. They say, hey, look, I got this machine. I don't know when it was turned on last. I don't want to sell it to somebody who wants to use it because I don't think it's going to work. And I'm like, send me one photo. Here's what I pay for it. I'll have a shipper there. And they're like, that's awesome. Because I don't care if it works. I'm like, I don't care if it works.
And
Sure.
here's the genius of it being an MCI machine is they were everywhere.
Everywhere.
They were a great sounding machine that was just like, if you went to anywhere, it seems like people could afford them. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming they were affordable to begin with. But in New York City, in the tri-state region, if you went into somebody's like the Fuji studio, MCI console, MCI tape machine, you went into these rooms, they were just everywhere. So now they're just everywhere.
And there isn't, I don't think there's an issue of Tape Op magazine that if you don't look at the photos of the older sessions,
Yeah.
there's not an MCI somewhere in the photo.
They probably have to have more machines out there than anyone.
Probably,
right when you
yeah.
think of it. Like Studer, sure, they're the Rolls Royce of it. And Atari was maybe, I don't know if you consider that a step above.
They're not
an MCI.
sexy though, the Ataris.
They felt like
Yeah.
you were going to the dentist office.
Yeah. So the Mara machines are really popular in Europe because it's an American product. It's an American sound.
Wow. So you can ship them. That's another.
we
that's
ship
a whole
every
other
machine.
thing. It's like that's a whole business plan. It's like how do I get that machine into a container and to Yugoslavia?
Yeah, actually we have 2 going to Russia this month. So we have a lot of them overseas. Yep.
Okay, so you've got these tape machines.
Yeah.
How much? What is the percentage? Is it 50-50? Is it 25-75 for Pro Tools to tape machine? What is it? What's your session
as far
load?
as sessioning, I think I want to say 70% tape to record,
Oh, wow.
but 100% everything ends up in Pro Tools. Like last night, we were recording. The artist is like, "Look, I don't want to see a video screen." I'm like, "Awesome," or a computer screen. Awesome. So we record on tape, And then, but at the end, we're transferring to Pro Tools, doing some overdubs. You know what I mean? It all ends up in Pro Tools. So.
And whenever you do that, is it like, okay, we have one reel tape that's a work reel. You run it at 15 or 30 ips.
30 ips.
So you have 16 minutes on a reel.
Yep. Dang.
So you get three songs on that reel.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not leadering it because you're probably going to use that tape again.
Exactly.
So no leader tape. So is it like, okay, we got a song, let's dump it into Pro Tools right away, or do you get 3 songs on a reel and then dump them in that night? Is it the next day process?
It's record as much as you want. Tape is free with the studio, and then we transfer at the end of the session. Or if there's that hinge point in a session where it's like, I want to start doing vocals and comp vocals, then I'm like, cool. And we just transfer in real time. Usually you're listening to it anyway, and then we start doing vocals and comp. So the way I have the studio set up is our computer for Pro Tools is an iMac that's over behind us. And then I can shut this screen off here and just wheel this away and shut the computer off when we're on tape.
That's cool.
And we want to transfer, we just play the tapes into Pro Tools. While that's going on, I set up this computer and off we go.
So what happens now? Are the overdubs on tape?
No, the overdubs typically are in Pro Tools.
That's what I'm...
Yeah.
Now, remember that clasp system?
Yep.
Was that something that was actually realistically viable?
It was overly complex.
There was a system called clasp where you could
Yeah.
essentially have like an insert that was tape.
Yep.
Insert, and you could print overdubs.
Yep.
Because what maybe I'm not explaining is, after you're done with your take, you put it into Pro Tools. But what if you want to do your vocal and you want it on tape? So it's like, okay, they developed a system called clasp that would sort of allow it to be like an insert and get recorded in the digital world, but be an analog recording.
Yeah, most artists want to record a bunch of takes and comp, so we just switch to Pro Tools for that. You know what I mean? It's more about...
You can always bounce it to tape.
Oh, yeah, and we do that
Fly
too
back?
afterwards. Oh, yeah, we get a comp vocal, run it to tape and back, line it back up. So it is the perfect time for technology because they all work so well together.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, how do you want to do it? And by the time they can explain to me what they want to do, we're already doing it.
I also noticed when I walked in, you had a tape loop.
Yeah.
So a thing you can do, and we'll try to insert a picture of that. Eli, remember the things that I'm calling out here so we get coverage of them. So you would take, in my studio, you'd take a machine and you would put mic stands around the control room. And you would, instead of the tape going from one reel to the other, it would come in past the guides, across the heads, and then it would go out into the room, depending on the length of delay you wanted.
All right.
And you would have an echoplex, and you'd be able to feed them back left or right, and have this great thing. What is that? Just a tape loop happening there? Or is that an echoplex?
That's a slapback. There's a slapback delay for vocals.
And what if you want something past 90 milliseconds? You'd have to go to a longer piece of tape.
Yeah, well, it's
Tape
just a
speed,
it's
very
a machine.
speed.
Yeah, and the very speed knob is on the console, so I can change it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because here's the thing, it's like, and this is a wonderment I have, right, where, you know, when recording started, they had tape delay, which was an accidental find, I believe, right? And then they had a spring reverb and they had a echo chamber. It was really, a plate reverb and an echo chamber is really all they had. And then digital reverbs came out, and the first thing they did was a delay, and you can't find a Lexicon reverb without a plate in it. And then plugins came, and they all have a plate.
And what you might not know, a plate was a physical, actual box with a piece of metal in it that had 2 transducers on it. People I've seen plates so much in the reverb world that you thought, oh, that was actually a space they put it into.
Yeah.
It was an actual piece of metal that would vibrate and be picked up with like guitar pickups.
Yeah.
So that was our first version of reverb.
Yeah, so we've got the real thing of that and the plugin. So when we're recording even the Pro Tools, it's like, why not use a real tape delay? Yeah, just in a real plate. And then usually at the end of the session, the producer or engineer they'll spend extra time to capture those analog reverbs back into the Pro Tools session.
Do you have a chamber here as well?
Yeah, we use this hallway, this 6 or 8 by 100 feet hallway.
That's amazing.
I could see the idea of, and it doesn't sound like you're doing this, because it's like someone will come and be like, oh, I'm going to only come to you when I need analog stuff. And you're like, no, we do everything, right? But I could see the barrier of, hey, we need to do everything old school, and it actually becomes prohibitive to creativity.
It can, and that's when, I'm real good about helping the artist to say, I think we should flip the switch right now.
Right.
Right.
We don't have to do this thing. We don't have to go across the country in a Conestoga wagon.
But more and more, that's because I think what an artist is looking for now is a story in their career, in their performance, in their show, and in the recording. So if that's part of the story and they like that, it's harder. Yeah. It's like, but there's people that build their own house without using any power tools too.
Right.
And they brag about it. Is it
get it.
crazy? Probably.
I get it, but
You
there
know?
has to be a point at which you're thinking, hey, what's in the best? I'm always thinking to myself, what's in the best interest of this song we're writing?
Yep.
What's in the best interest of this record we're making? Is it better, or are we actually just sort of being sadomasochists at this point in regards to doing this for the...
But if the artist is driving that bus, then it's our job to make it as seamless. And it's fun because this ethos I accidentally created has challenged me to be a better recording engineer. And like last month we had, I can't talk about the project yet, but this pretty famous singer in a pretty famous band had dug up some demos that he did in a previous band and wanted to release on vinyl, but wanted to keep it all analog because his tapes were analog. But we had to remaster it. So then we go into Mar machines, grab a 1/4-inch tape machine because his tapes were 1/4-inch, grab a 1/2-inch tape machine, mastered analog to new 1/2-inch tape, sequence a song, and cut lacquers from 1/2-inch tape.
Wow.
And it was a process, but at the end it was like, this is really cool. And the artist is like, this is what I want to do, let's do it.
And I wonder if people don't perform differently.
They do.
Knowing that it's like a different medium than they're used to. That
Right.
This is different than I could do at home. Coming here, it's like the all the tape and all the analog gear is. I just wonder if it brings something different out of.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
If you had a guitar plugged into an amp right now,
Right.
and you're playing a little riff, and the amp was on clean setting, and I walked over and started to overdrive it, you would
Sure.
play a bar chord.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even think about it.
Sure.
You're gonna play differently,
Yeah.
right? With the equipment around
That's
you
really
as
cool.
it's changing, right?
Yeah.
And I've talked to singers like, I like a nice mic because it makes me feel important. As
yeah.
vain as that is, it makes sense. If I get into a $200,000 car, I'm not gonna stop at McDonald's and get a cheeseburger. I'm gonna put my phone down and drive the fucking car.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And same thing. People, this isn't words I use, but they say, I want to come and record on tape and do it the right way. I don't use those words. That's not how I talk
Yeah.
about equipment. But when an artist, when they're emulating their heroes that recorded it in big studios on tape, they want to do that. They've got the old guitar, they got the old amp,
Sure.
right?
Right.
So, and there's I think as a growth of an engineer, I can speak, recording on tape really does hone your skills. You have to pay attention. Your mistakes kind of matter more.
Sure.
Because you can't just undo something, right? If you erase a vocal that you shouldn't have erased, you have to say, I erased a vocal I shouldn't have erased, right? And then there you got a scar and you're better for it, hopefully. Artists too, they learn how to be a better recording artist. Punching in on tape and going, oh wow, I was 1/2 inch off the mic and I can hear it, and they know that. You don't even have to talk about it, and then they're better at it.
Yeah.
Do you punch drums in?
Oh yeah, all the time.
In the old days, we would try to avoid punching drums in just because it was such to get that crossfade on the machine.
No, that's great.
So your machines are
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty big statement. So that's
Yep.
impressive. So I saw recently that y'all did a live to vinyl recording
Yep.
here,
Mm-hmm.
and we're hoping that we'll get to see all of what
Yes.
you do here in this building, not just the studios. Whenever we do the tour a little bit later, which we will put in one of those little cards above us, and we'll link in the description the actual foot tour that we're going to do
Yeah.
of Welcome to 1979. But that was, so you had a band going live right to vinyl.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know that I fully understand that. I mean, the trapeze work that's involved with that.
yeah, it's the most fun way to record ever. So in the history of recording, there was no tape machines in I'm going to make up numbers, 1940 something. So they would record right to an acetate, right? So you would talk and it would go microphone right to a little portable lathe, and it would be a transcription disc, right? And they did that forever, right? That if you look at
Like all the Robert Johnson, right?
all
was
the Robert
direct
Johnson
to-
stuff. You look at what's that movie? Oh man, I'm so bad at this.
Crossroads?
No, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? You're singing
Uh-huh.
the can. Well,
Right.
they were going right to a lathe, right? Well, then they said, well, this sucks because you have to do all your songs in a row. You screw up the last song, we have to do the whole disc again. They came up with a tape machine so you can do one song at a time, and on and on and on, right, to Pro Tools. So now lathes also obviously are much more high fidelity. It's what you master to when doing a vinyl record. So we're one of the few places in the world that has a vinyl mastering suite located within a studio. Most are in a mastering room with no studio near it, right?
Yeah,
like a
all of
dedicated
them.
facility. Yeah, all of
Right?
them. I mean,
is there any other than yours?
I think you would be hard pressed to come up with 5 in the world that aren't like Third Man has them, but they're in a live performance area, right? Not a studio. But anyway, all that being said, so what happens is, and we do it big. We don't like the direct to discs or live to vinyl sessions they did in the 70s were mainly jazz, orchestral. We do rock, Americana, So the Blackberry Smoke one we're talking about last month, they brought in a 12-piece band, horns, backgrounds, keys, bass, guitars, right? Recorded and mixed live. The console out of our compressors from 2-mix down to the mastering chain, analog mastering chain, right to the cutter head on the lathe. So, like we were talking about a second ago, the performances are amped up. I mean, the players are like, we're doing 4 songs in a row.
It means, red light fever.
Let's
ultimate.
go. And the energy is unhinged in a really good way. Then, from a technical side, there's only 2 conversions. And I'm talking conversions, not just digital to analog. I'm talking, I view a tape machine as a conversion to and from, right? You're changing formats, you're converting it to something, right? So we have air to a diaphragm and a microphone, to electricity, right? To a cutter head, which is a microphone in reverse, to the groove. That's it. So by the time your pick is on the other side of the string, it's on a groove.
Wow.
Recorded, mixed, mastered.
Is there some safety
No.
policy like, I'm going to make sure I cheat on level because if dude decides to blast horn right onto microphone, it's going to jump out of the groove?
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself? Is there a brick wall, something somewhere?
You guess. No, there's some limiters here and there, but those things would destroy it, yeah. Or be detrimental. And in the art of cutting lacquers, and Maggie and Anna who cut here, to watch them do it, it looks very easy, which anytime you see someone do something complex and makes it look easy, they're really good at what they do. When you're cutting a lacquer for a release, like we get wave files, the lathe has a safety system so the grooves won't overlap. It has a look ahead to space the grooves appropriately. Well, when you're cutting a live band, you don't have that.
Oh, so it knows from program how long program is, and then it judges spaces.
Yeah.
Of
so you have to do literally math and set your groove spacing and then have your hand on that knob. In case they get louder, you got to crank the grooves.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So you have all of that and no safety features. It's just,
So was it one take?
Yeah.
Or did they have to do it again?
No, they did one take. Wow. So I tell bands, let's do 4 songs. It's really nice. You get done with the second one, you're like, I'm halfway. You know what I mean? And it's 2 4-song sets.
It's like going out onto a tightrope.
Yeah, it really is.
You're like waiting for the halfway point to
Yep.
see the barn and go home.
Yep. So and as we talk, I think you get the impression that I love blending technologies, and that Blackberry Smoke record we did was part of our recording summit, where typically pre-COVID there would be about 100 people here in the building, and that's our kickoff party. And we did the summit remote this year. So we said, well, let's just, these people that attending, quote unquote, signed up through a software, and we just blasted out to them via Zoom. So I think it was about 10 minutes before we did it, I was like, I think this is probably the first live to vinyl to Zoom ever, because we took the outputs of lathe to Zoom. You know what I mean?
So here's the question. It's
and
like
had cameras running around. It was
people
pretty cool.
talk about the vinyl era with such like nostalgia.
Yeah.
And the reality is your mix engineer and your artist had no idea that it was going to sound the way it sounds on vinyl. Vinyl has its own reality. It sounds that way because of the medium. But it's not like we decided to make it super silky.
Correct,
It's very
correct.
much a byproduct of the medium, and we don't even consider that when we mix, so it's not some genius move. So is there a benefit to bypassing tape machine and going right to vinyl? Does it sound just like you had cut it on tape machine and then to vinyl, or is there some special thing that we didn't anticipate going right from microphone to vinyl?
Right to microphone to vinyl. So the gentleman that restored that lathe for me, his name is Chris Muth. And
New York.
Yeah. And
Dangerous,
he's like,
right?
Yeah. Really cool guy. He's like, hey, man, the first chance you get, do a direct to disc. It's going to blow your mind. And about 3 months later, it might have been Heidi Feek. I don't quote me on it. Came over. I'm like, let's just do a acoustic guitar vocal. And I heard it back. You bring a lacquer up here and put it. Listen back, and it's like, wow, this is as close as to being in the room with somebody ever. Because of that.
What would you say what was it? Just dynamic range that was the difference?
God, I hate this word, just clarity. There was just nothing. It was like I could just see right through it. I don't know. My jaw dropped. I grabbed my phone. I texted Muth. I'm like, dude, wow. Yeah. So I do them every chance I get. When I get done mixing it, my forearms are hurt because of the intensity.
Right.
And artists, we've done about 15 or 20 of them, direct-to-disc recordings. And the artists come up, and they listen, and they go, that sounds cool. And you're done. It's so strange.
Right.
Like,
that's an incredible point, by the way.
You have to read them the riot act previous to go, listen, there's no changing this?
No. I explain it, and I have this little, pre-game speech. It's like, look, we're all going to make mistakes, right? I'm going to choose to make mistakes going for something. I'm going to push up your guitar thinking it's a solo. I'm going to let it ride for a few bars and bring it down, right? That's how I choose to make my mistakes, right? Instead of missing an opportunity. And they go, cool, right? And they're usually gig enough. They know how to do that stuff. But so the typical day is we'll come and get sounds, lathe gets adjusted, mastering engineer gives me the thumbs up, Maggie's like, cool, let's do it. So we start cutting some test song, as the band's running on, just some little test snippets. And then let's do a couple songs, right? So the band gets ready. We actually do a couple songs to a 12-inch lacquer, not a 14-inch production one. And then come up and listen. And I grab my legal pad and I'm like ready to have this big, because I mix records. I know what, 0.2 dB is up and down, right? And they're always like, sounds really cool. Maybe more bass? And the bass player went, no, I don't think so. It's like, okay. So Jason Isabel, and I'm like, we're done? Yeah, right. Let's go cut it. And I and then it comes out. It's like, they're going to let it, okay.
And do you think that's just your mixing prowess, or do you think that's the medium that kind of makes it acceptable, right?
I would love to say it's my mixing. I'm just that good. No, I'm not, right? I'm an average at best engineer. I think because I don't know. This is not a fully formed thought yet, right? Because it's still baffling to me, right? But I think that they're listening to the performance and not to themselves so much. Because if you can change something in your bass part, you're listening to your bass part.
Right.
If you can't, then you're listening to the groove.
Different conversation. Yeah.
That's
I
that's my
think
perception.
the medium itself is a lens to see the music through that's just more pleasing. And there's certain versions of okay, I don't have a comment because it was through a format that just is more appealing to listen to, the lens of vinyl,
Yeah.
You always wonder what causes that, and it's there's a paradigm shift with each technology jump. I tell people it's if I find that I'm track building a song and I bring a drummer in, he and I are having a lot more conversations about his kick pattern than when I have a band of 12 guys in my barn.
Right. Totally.
Well, why is that? The point is, why is that? Shouldn't it just be the same all the time? And the reality shows you well, if I can create a paradigm that gets us more holistically listening, well, then maybe we end up with a better holistic product that is more unified rather than this decentralized version of music that we've turned into.
Yeah.
When you're cutting the tape, not direct to vinyl,
right?
When you're just cutting the tape and you put it into Pro Tools, how often are you getting people wanting to edit those performances?
Oh, all the time. That's part of it.
You are, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the studio gets booked, as its own studio, right? Mm-hmm. Not with me involved as an engineer,
sure.
Beyond being an engineer. So typically you come here and you just collect, would be the word I use. We're gonna track, we're gonna do heavy overdubs, guitars, vocals if we can, and then dump to Pro Tools and they go home and they edit it. Right. Yeah. It's the perfect marriage. You get the sound and we'll do a couple outtakes and transfer those to Pro Tools. So
I used to have a studio in the RCA building.
Yeah, okay.
They had the B, the famous one in back,
mm-hmm.
A, which was Ben Folds when I was there. Now it's Cobb's.
Yep.
And then they had this little byproduct room that used to be Chet Atkins' recording studio, Studio C. It's kind of nobody even knows about it. It's essentially a glorified closet, but it was a cool enough little, I'm probably downplaying it too much, but it was like a tour bus kind of size. And one day I'm working in there, and in walks these guys from the old RCA studios. They were having a symposium at Studio B where they brought back all the old guys.
Oh, that's cool.
All the guys that had done the Patsy Cline stuff and the Elvis stuff. And they wanted to see my room because they were like, oh, I used to work out of this room. And they're like, the tape machine was over there, and Chet used to hang his coat over here. So it was really great. And they invited me to come to their little hang. And I was listening to them. And some of the guys that were the assistants went on to do evergreen copyrights that would blow your mind. But one of the guys was saying, hey, I remember I was assisting you on a record, and it was an Elvis record. And we had everybody in here, and he said, I was holding, he said whatever mic it was. It's something, I don't, so old school, I don't even have it, like an old BK5B or something. I was holding this BK5B on the oboe, and then there was a solo on the, and he said, you just told me, all right, and he was like a glorified mic stand, and he said, it was done at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't just done at the end of the day. The record was done, 12 songs, and it came out mono to a monochromatic, tape machine that they were putting it onto, and it was done. And you listen to those records nowadays, and I'd argue that you couldn't find a better holistic vibe on a modern record, right?
100%.
There's something to a whole philosophy of like, I'm going to go to 1979 and we're going to commit to making a record like this, and it will change. Your record you will make here will be drastically different than the track-built record you'd make at your house.
Well, and Jeremy, who engineered the Blackberry Smoke direct to disc, we're talking about it because a couple songs sound better than the others, right? And the mix didn't really change. It's just the arrangement is a little better, right? Minutely, right? We're getting into the weeds here, right? Him and I yesterday, but there is no way a guitar player on an Elvis record that's live to mono or stereo is going to play something that has to be ducked or edited out or will step on something. There's absolutely no way he or she's going to do that.
Not with a room full of 25 people making the record.
No, because it has to fit. And things that fit, guess what? Sound better.
That's a great point. And keep in mind, in that room in Studio B, that kind of looks like a diner, right? It's not much bigger than this room.
It's not glamorous.
But it's like Elvis. He said Elvis was back there.
Yeah.
Goboed off. The background singers were over here, and had this little orchestra over here, and then we had the band here, and then I was moving the mic, and it was like, whoa, there was no overdubs either.
Bleed like crazy.
No.
Your brain doesn't like even compute like, well, they did all that, and then they overdubbed stuff. Is what you'd think, but they were done. There was no mix. The mix was the performance of the song. It came out the mono output of the console right to a machine, and it was like, here's your record.
It sounds so appealing as I think of it.
Right, and
there's a part of it that I'm like,
it's like amazing.
desperately envious of.
Well, when you listen to, I'm sorry, Chris.
No.
When you listen to like the Led Zeppelin stuff, I'm embarrassed to say I was a late comer to Led Zeppelin. I didn't have any older brothers or sisters, so I kind of missed the Led Zeppelin thing. I grew up in Puerto Rico, and it was like not really a thing. So I got into it later in life, and it's like, you hear those downbeats. They're not like together, but it somehow makes it bigger sounding. I'm at home editing the crap out of everything to put it right on the downbeat.
And
doesn't sound nearly as big.
And nobody gives a shit.
Nobody gives a shit.
Not that it's your record,
no.
but like nobody gives a shit because like there's no humanity
the
to
humanity is what we love in that stuff.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting because when we talked about like talking to the drummer about the kick drum, your whole world, your whole philosophy of how you're going to get out or how you're going to do your moonshot, how you're going to record your record, it becomes a completely different dialogue when you say we're going to do it to tape and we're going to do it old school and we're going to do it live to a lathe. Certain conversations don't even happen. And then you have to wonder, how valuable are those conversations in the big scheme of things?
This is like, the more I think about it, it's so brilliant to have every facet of how you'd like to record in one spot. You could do it. You can get the sound of tape, edit the ever-living hell out of it if you want.
You can
make it as tight as you want. You could do it all. It's so cool that you could do it all here. And the vibe of this place is incredible, by the way. For those, it's hard to probably tell on camera, but the vibe is unbelievable in this building.
But from a recording engineer standpoint, to your point about conversations, to sit down with the band and the engineer and the mastering engineer and talk about what song order, hey, Maggie, I'm going to use this vocal mic, right, because I think it's going to be better for you, right, to talk about, like, all this kind of stuff. We're talking 16 minutes. You guys have 4 songs that total 16 minutes. Okay, cool. Okay, let's put the slow song last. All those things to make a better record, literally make a better record.
Yeah.
You know?
Literally, make a better record.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, because Charlie just emailed me, lead singer, he got his record. They hadn't heard it since it was a record. I'm like, what do you think? He's like, it's awesome. And like, I'm trying to think of what it must feel like as an artist to listen to a WAV file sent from Hightail or Dropbox as a mix. Like, and the comment would be, give me your input, right?
Yeah. Let me know what you think.
Let me know what you think, because this is a work in progress, right?
And you're just like, congratulations, here's your record.
Putting a record on, and just what I want to know what he's thinking. It's like, is it a more sort of looking for, not passive listening, but more of a sit back in an armchair and enjoy the listening versus legal pad, 0.2 dB, keys up, this, that, you know what I mean?
Who was it? Was it Richard Dodd or someone had said, went on a Mix magazine interview and they said, I find that when I mix without automation, people tend to refer less to things in less than a quarter of a dB. Well, I think it was Richard Dodd.
Yeah.
Where he said, people, they stop using that language with me, which is like, hey, bring up the vocal quarter of a dB.
Yeah.
It's like with automation, you do that stuff.
Yeah.
The more access you have, and now, you know what? You don't have to sing it right. We'll deal with it out in some unlinear time-based world where some guy spends 10 hours fixing your 3 minutes of singing. Right? It's like, it's getting more and more like infinite in regards to control. But I just think it's interesting that the conversations that you have are different along the way. And you have to ask yourself, how valuable are the conversations if you can have magic moments with a philosophy that we're just going to go ahead and accept the medium for what it is, and we're going to focus on the music, not focus on the 10 kick drum samples that you're going to send me, or the direct guitar. It's like, why am I getting direct guitar? Am I supposed to reamp your guitars and make a decision for your producer, for your guitar player who I've never met, as to what they like? Am I supposed to do that as an engineer?
Yeah.
The idea that, like, at the end of the day, someone says, oh, well, wait a minute. Don't leave. I'm going to give you your finished record. Here it is. Oh, watch it. It's hot. Here,
Right.
You're like,
It's really,
the idea of that is just, like, mind-baffling.
And there's nothing wrong with making records any which way, right? There's tons of food I don't like, right? But it's food, people love it, right? And I had this quasi-realization a few years ago where it's like, I'm really in control of my own destiny on how I interface with music and how on the records I work on and how I work on them, right? So I'm going to put this foot forward, right? To get to those conversations, to have those magic moments, to work on cool things, right? And that's why I kind of lean towards that. Philosophy, not so much a format. Like I'm fully convinced I can make a really awesome analog sounding record on Pro Tools, given a cool space, cool people, and some cool methodology. You know what I mean? Like, a direct-to-disc session is all that it is, and the lathe is there, right?
Right.
I mean, we could do that live to Pro Tools, right?
Yeah.
But it would erode quickly, right? Let's do a playlist. Let's do another one. Let's set those two together, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it could happen. But you really have to then
slippery slope.
Exactly. So the tool,
nobody's saying that it's just like the internet is rife for this whole, like, go down a long pathway and this is what this guy is trying to tell you to do. No, we're not telling you to do anything. We're just talking about the irony of, like, having a product in a beautiful record, like a Patsy Cline record that you listen to it and you can say, that was one of the best listening experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
Versus all the control in the world and the differences it would take to make those records and where we get lost along the way.
Yeah.
That's the problem with modern music, in my humble opinion. We get lost along the way.
Well, and let me be a dick for a moment. And if I were to be in a debate with somebody, because it happens once in a while on accident, I just came to me now. I'm going to start saying, look, I will have this conversation with you, which is better, once you've done both. I have.
Yeah. Because who's going to cut live to a lathe? So you'll never have to have that conversation.
Because I can compare the experiences, the sound, the feeling, because I've done both. Right. And most likely the person I'm talking to has not done both.
Well, and I think your mission statement here at the studio proves that. It's like, hey, it's not always, we've got it. Yeah. It's not always the best solution to a problem. Yeah. Let's go ahead and cut it to Pro Tools.
Yeah, and we've done, and I've talked to bands that want to do a direct-to-disc because it's really cool. And it's like, oh, you guys haven't gigged in a while. Why don't we just come in and do a bunch of singles direct-to-disc? Yeah. And we played those lacquers into Pro Tools and then released them on Spotify. And it's like, this is amazing. This is like, it was awesome.
Can you tell me, I know enough of the nomenclature to know, like, okay, you cut
So Spotify. No, okay.
the internet. Explain it to me. What is it? Lacquer. That's
Yes.
what you cut with the lathe.
Yep.
That goes and they make a mother.
Yep, which we do here.
Okay.
Yep.
So can you take us from lathe to CD to LP that actually arrives to your house?
Sure.
What are the versions in the process?
Yeah. So this is anatomy. All right. This is how I explain things. We all know anatomy, male, female, right? Ridges and grooves. So a lacquer is the first. It's actually a ruby styli cutting grooves into a softer material that plays just like a record, right? But we don't play it because it will damage it. So that's grooves. That goes into our other part of our building and gets processed, and we get, for big records, like multiple copies, we get a father, which is a metal version of that with ridges, anatomy, father. Then we take the lacquer, throw it away. It's gone. Never to be used again. So now we have a father, and that father you put back in the process, and you get a metal mother off of it, right? Which has grooves.
Recesses, right?
Yeah. And then you can make multiple mothers, so it's a little bit of polygamy here. And
Off
then,
the same father.
Off the same father. Father goes back on the shelf, and each mother can make a son, which has grooves, which is also called a stamper, which goes to a pressing plant and makes about 1,000 copies. So it's a tree, right?
And then it's like not good anymore because it's worn out?
It will tend to break, yeah.
So your 1,000th copy of the LP sounds different than the first copy?
In theory, no. So a stamper can last up to 2,500, 3,000. Most plants will pull them off after a couple thousand.
And they call it that because it literally goes bam.
Yeah. So we're talking hard nickel into soft. So
And does it do it on both sides at the same time?
yep, A and B.
So two sons.
Yep.
So you can make as many mothers off of the father. The father will stay in perpetuity somewhere to archive the project.
Yes. Typically, and this is where I think gold records came from. Typically, you get one father. Father can make 5 mothers safely, right? And each mother can make about 10 stampers, which is about 100,000 records.
But you never really go back to the father after those 5
No.
mothers.
So then my theory is, hey, bad news is we have to cut another lacquer, but the good news is we sold 100,000 records, so we're gold. That's where we're gold records.
And that's why these guys are like,
in my opinion.
oh, which pressing of the vinyl do you have?
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
they went back to, I think John McBride had the mono masters of the Beatles, and they actually used his mono masters to generate the mono releases that they did.
Yeah, because, okay, let's just back it up. This is manufacturing, right? We're talking about making records.
You don't manufacture here.
No, we do the metal work. So we do the first 2 of the 3 steps. One of the only places in the country that does that. Anyway, if our band was big in the States, but we had a big following in Australia and a big following in the UK, we wouldn't press the records here and ship them overseas.
Now, in Australia, the records go the other way,
Exactly. No. We would send tapes. So you and I would just make safety
and
tapes.
They would do
So then they're going to sound different. Like we can change in vinyl mastering. When you're cutting a lacquer, you can drastically change the way a record sounds. So that's why people tend to go for in my opinion, the original master, because the artist was involved, the producer listened to it. I mean, hell, we've cut reissues of Thriller here. You know what I mean? And yeah, it sounds good, I'm sure, but MJ didn't listen to it for obvious reasons.
Well, I was reading that Jeff Emmerich book,
Mm-hmm.
and he had said that they spent all their time on the mono mixes,
I believe it.
and they didn't really think stereo was a thing. And we've been listening to stereo mixes for 40 years, or 50 years. But I think that there's a real, I guess, when does the band stop signing off on mothers or lacquers? When do they sign off on, the mother?
No.
Or the pressing from the sun they sign off?
Test pressing, typically.
So they sign off on the variant. When do they stop? When does someone stop signing off on that?
That depends on the artist.
Huh.
You talk to a guy like Pete Townsend, he's listening, he's part of it. Nowadays, I've been asked to sign off on test pressings, which I deny. I will not do that. No, I'm responsible. No. You know what I mean? So
what's it cost to get it to the state that you have a sun and hard product?
Oh, I don't
Is that
do
it?
the
The
numbers.
sun is the stamper?
Stamper, yeah.
Is the sun the stamper, or do they make stampers off the sun?
Sun is a stamper. Sun isn't really a term. I just used it to continue my analogy of anatomy. Yeah.
Okay, so the stamper, like, what does it take? What was my question?
How much does it cost?
Yeah,
It
what does it
depends.
take financially to get to the point that you're stamping records?
I mean,
And hard costs.
I don't do numbers. I don't.
What are we talking about? $100, $1,000?
About 600 some aside.
Because it seems like an
Roughly.
expensive process. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
machines. You know, it seems
Yeah.
like you'd go back to be a big like CNC machine
Yeah.
or something that would be very expensive. to do that.
Well, it starts making financial sense at 1,000 records because all the costs are the same whether you press 10 records or 1,000.
Exactly.
So that's why it's manufacturing at that point. So
Well, awesome. I mean, great, very interesting conversation. I wanted to ask you one more thing before
Of
we
course.
let you go. I know you got a phone call you got to get
No,
to. This console, do you use the mic pre's in it?
I do.
Like this, when you're tracking a record, it comes through these
Yeah.
mic pre's? Is this console totally stock, or has it been amended, hot rodded?
Both. So I went to look for this make and model, right? Because I loved it, and I bought it, and then I found out that Porter Wagner bought it new, and somebody on his team, MCI, offered a few different transformers on the mic pre's, and this one had all of them, like channels 1 through 8 had this the Semcom, and this one had the Bayer,
Wow.
and this one had the right, and this one had the MCI. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I restored it, recapped it. It sounds amazing. And then as more engineers started using the studio, they were like, well, I don't know this console. And I'm like, right, Back in Black, Eagles, Hotel California, but still, right? So what I did was I kept all the mic pre's. I called Jeff Steiger from Cappy over, and he designed a sister board, and we put API pre's in there from the same era as well. We didn't take the old ones out, and you can listen. Like right now, we can be listening and flip to API pre's and then back.
So there's 2 mic pre's?
Yes,
In each
in
channel?
each channel, and you can switch without repatching. So
That's amazing.
What do you find that you like? Where do you tend? Is it 50-50?
they're so close on some instruments that I use it more for efficiency. Like a typical session, you'll do a drum take and the drummer will do a tambourine overdub on like the left overhead. I'll have the other mic pre at a higher gain for the tambourine.
Oh, it's more out of utility than
Yeah, or a guitar player does a double, I'll just switch. But when outside engineers use the place, I'll walk in, say hi at 10 in the morning, and they're like APIs. I come back after lunch, how's it going? I look, and it may be 3 APIs lit up. You know what I mean? Because you can see there's a lit switch. So I wanted to honor the sound. I didn't want to say I replaced them. I'm like, you have a choice. And they're like, it's always like, I get an email, it's like, damn, those pre's sound great. I'm like, yeah, they really do. So.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
You're welcome. This has been fun.
This is fun, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's a good time. It is fun to be on the road, too.
It is.
It's a little bit
I
weird,
love
but
this
it's
studio.
fun.
I love this studio.
We're going to try to show it the best we can with our studio tour, and hopefully we'll get to see. I came out here to look at a VR once. You had a VR.
Uh-huh.
that was
Okay,
for
yeah.
sales.
Yeah.
Ring a bell?
Yeah, I think it was Steve Durrs, most likely. He had had over here being restored in our shop.
I had come over
Yep.
to take a look at it, to maybe buy it,
Yep.
and then I was like, holy cow, look at all this stuff. And it's not just a studio. It's not just an 8,000 square foot studio. It's a whole tech room and then a cutting lathe, and then there's just like, it goes on and
Yeah.
on. It's like Mall of America.
I get my 10,000 steps a day.
There you go.
Totally.
Well, thank you for hanging out with us. It is, tell you what, if you're looking for, and we don't do ads on this, I mean, this is an interesting concept, but I think that this is a real outlet if you want to change it up and make a decision to do something. If you need something different in your creative life, or if you need the same, they can do the same.
Yeah.
But especially, you can't go anywhere for the different, right?
Correct.
So it's a great destination to come and just get your mind out of your normal setup and make a record. Make
Yeah.
an interesting new record that's pushes the way you think of the process, maybe changes the outcome of it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
That's it. Signing off from the West Barn. We'll see you next time.